Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hello, friends. Welcome. It's me and the frogs. They've woken up last few days, but yesterday was a little cold for them, and so they weren't singing. But today, I don't know if the mic's picking them up. Actually, it's a different microphone than I was using last time I was in this room. But maybe you can hear the sound of the frogs. Let me just. All right. Nice to be here. Welcome. It's a sunny morning here. It's also a sleepy morning here. I don't know why particularly this morning, but usually I just wake up naturally before any kind of alarm. But when I'm doing this, I do have an alarm set. And this morning I was just really deeply asleep when my alarm went off about an hour ago. So I've been out in the sunlight, and but I still can very much feel the vestiges of the sleep world still, like something of a fog in the atmosphere of the chitosphere. So yeah, maybe you're feeling bright and lively this morning, or maybe like me, still a little sleepy. What I did yesterday, what I thought I'd do this morning, this week generally, is just point to some kind of some common misunderstandings in meditation each day, and then adjust for them a little bit. So yesterday we looked at the one-pointed focus and the ways we tend to understand that in a way that's a little narrow or tight, and a more helpful way of understanding that, which is in a much more expansive sense, that this is the ekagata, the one location, the one point. It's the one point where everything's happening. So rather than trying to narrow our attention to as if only one thing should be happening, like just breathing and nothing else, rather having an open field of attention in which we might still be focused on breathing, but there's a sense of nothing need be in any way excluded. And that's a better way to practice. So also a kind of easier way to practice. It's also certainly a much more portable or integratable way to practice into the rest of our lives, where where one needs to have a more open attention very often, because there's stuff going on. If you're walking down the road, you're too narrow focus, you hit a lamppost. All right. This morning, I thought I'd talk about one of the common expectations, and maybe this is mostly pertinent for those of you quite new to practice, but I think in a subtle way it can sustain actually quite a long way into practice. And that is, well, I'm going to talk about it in terms of stillness and emptiness. I think what we're often hoping for or expecting from meditation is stillness. And what we're actually really orientating for or confronted with is emptiness. So I'll just say a little what I mean about that. And like with yesterday's explorations, stillness can happen. We can touch a deep sense of stillness where it seems like a body sort of becomes completely light, fluid, quiet, refined, right? And where breathing becomes very, very subtle, smooth, feather-like, and where the world just sort of melts into a kind of vast pool of stillness. Right? So that can happen in meditation. But look to your own experience. How often is that the case? That your meditation is marked by a feeling of just complete stillness? Probably not very often. So if it happens, when it happens, oh, delightful, drink it in. Let yourself be nourished in that moment. It's like a bath for the whole nervous system, like a reset. It's very, very clarifying, refreshing. Right? But you can't make it happen. The attempt to try to make it happen, like trying to be still, is a misnomer, because the very effect of trying is you're doing something, and you can't do stillness. Stillness is very much characterized by non-doing, non-effort, non-strive. Right? So it's not so helpful to orientate to stillness. And yet very often that's what we do. We think, oh, I want thought to stop. I want to be still. And of course that's an understandable projection, because we come to meditation and we're confronted by agitation, by running thoughts, by kind of certain restless energy, right? By various impulses or discomforts. And we sort of dream of a meditation where all that goes away and I just get to sit in some sort of perfect stillness. So you might just check for yourself. What's your hope from meditation? Both your, maybe your conscious hope, your stated hope, but maybe there's another hope underneath there. Are you hoping for, are you scanning for, are you reaching for stillness? So if stillness is not what we're actually reaching for or orientating towards, what is emptiness? So both of these terms, stillness and emptiness, represent and point to a certain kind of freedom from, or we could equally say a freedom within, our realm of experience. A freedom. Stillness, it would be more a sense of a freedom from, right, all that's happening as it recedes and becomes quiet and refined and still, and as a sense of things dropping away, dropping into stillness. And emptiness represents that sense of actually a freedom within, like while things are happening, one's not getting bound up with them. One's not pushing and pulling with them. One's not getting into friction with them. So, same thing, we come into meditation and we notice just the restlessness of body, and it's like, okay, it's just that. It's that one that knows its emptiness or its goneness or its transparency. Those are all other words for shunyata. Because this agitation or this restlessness that I might feel, just the buzziness of my nervous system, or the habitual repetitive grinding of the thought life, or some unpleasant mind state, right? Feeling grumpy or tired or resentful or sad or whatever it is. Whatever's going on, what one's orientating towards is the fact that it's temporary. First of all, it's just flickering, right? It's like in the song by Leonard Cohen, it's like flecks of dust dancing in the sunlight of awareness. And I say that right now with the sunlight, the slanting sunlight coming right through my door and revealing actually the flecks of dust dancing in the light between me and the screen. And that allows for a certain kind of relaxation and freedom within what's happening. I don't need what's happening to recede or stop or slow down or become still, because the freedom is born of a different orientation. It's just happening. It's brief. There's a sort of rightness. Right? Our sounds arise and they express and they fade. It's like, oh yeah, everything is expressing the nature of the universe, and it's expressing it in a way that's brief, in a way that's orderly, in a way that that orientates to peace, because everything arises and then disappears. And what does it disappear into? It disappears into the kind of unfathomable depths of reality. And that might sound a bit intense, but it's true. It disappears into the kind of the primordial ground of awareness. It disappears in a way that's unfindable. That's the way, the goneness, emptiness. The nature of everything is to reveal its emptiness, its insubstantiality. And so then whatever arises in body, mind, senses, world around us, the meditative freedom of perception within it is knowing its free nature, its empty nature, its fluid nature, its gone nature. Whether I feel still or whether I feel agitated, whether I feel peaceful or whether I feel dynamic, whether I feel sleepy or whether I feel bright, whether I feel happy or whether I feel sad, very, very less important. However I feel, whatever body and mind is like, is just part of this kind of interwoven texture of reality. This luminous, empty display. Right? Both luminous, right? Deeply worthy of attention, brilliant, sacred, holy even, and empty. Worthy of attention, but not worthy of fussing over. Worthy of caring about, but not worthy of clinging to. So, stillness or emptiness. Let's sit together a while in meditation, and I'll give just a little instruction. That sort of was most of the instruction, really, for this morning. But I'll just give a little bit as we sit together towards this orientation to emptiness as we sit. So, please, friends, take your seat for meditation. See if you can let your attention really gather without forcing it in any way. Letting your attention gather and brighten and settle. Settle into the feel of body sitting, body breathing. Settle into the feel of breath arising and falling. The feel of everything flickering and fading, coming and going. Letting your attention gather and settle in a way that expresses presence. Presence within this field of changing experience. And here is the field of our practice then. Presence and absence, or goneness or emptiness. Well, we're simultaneously right here, and yet we can't find anything right here. We're right here, so clearly, so obviously, so undeniably. And yet there's nothing that's right here. Just the changing, flowing, empty, luminous display of life. Just like this. So maintaining your usual practice. Present. Intention to really be here in the midst of experience in a way that's awake, relaxed, open and simple. And whenever you notice that your attention has become fixated upon something, some bodily discomfort, some idea or story or memory or whatever, notice how the fixation of your attention makes that thing seem solid, real. And see if in that moment you can just relax the fixation and see the emptiness. Of that thought stream or story or whatever. It's like returning everything to life, letting everything have its rhythm of coming and going. Surrendering. And thus becoming this luminous, empty display. whatever's happening. Whatever's happening right now. This is the luminous, empty display of reality. This is the free unfolding of life. letting your practice be a meditation on emptiness and form. Meeting each moment as empty, fluid, radiant, transparent, ungraspable. Noticing how our usual mind, our habits and fixations and views make our experience into something seemingly solid, creating some sense of friction, of negotiation, of boundary. And letting all of that be transparent. Fluid. May we relax into the empty, radiant display of everything. And may we know the fundamental nature of our own minds as the foundation of this empty, radiant display. All right. Numbers meditation. I'm aware that sometimes the language around emptiness can seem a little confusing. It's not a perfect word. That's why I tend to use sort of several: emptiness, goneness, transparency, to try to suggest that quality. So if there's some confusion around the term or some way in which your experience and my description feel far away from each other, then there's some opportunity to explore that, if you have anything around that you want to speak about, ask about, explore, feel free. You can raise your hand down at the bottom there, and then I can invite you on screen. Or you can just write a question in the chat box, and then in that case write question in caps above your question, and then I'll be able to see it in the chat box. And likewise, if if you raise your hand, let me know in the chat box that you've raised your hand, right? Because the way I can't track everything that's going on there at the same time. Yeah. All right, before we get into questions, just the reminder that all of this is offered freely by the goodwill and hard work and technical complexity of many people. There's a whole it takes a whole team at Sangha Live. We offer basically free programming like this almost every day of every month. And it's free of commitment, it's free of charge, it's free of subscription, it's free, but it's not free of cost. There's a lot of costs. Just, people and time, and there's a few people who this is their full-time job, managing all of this. And there's also just all the hosting costs and communication costs and database costs, and it just takes a lot. And there's no great benefactor in the sky supporting all of this. It's supported by you. It's supported by many small donations from people that care about what's happening here and want to make sure it continues. So if you would like Sangha Live to survive, firstly, and then furtherly to thrive, and to be able to continue increasing programming and the things we do, like there's the whole community platform which some of you use and engage with, right? Which is a really great resource for Sangha, and that doesn't produce like any revenue, as it were. It's just from a purely kind of if we just measure the financial involvement of that, it's quite a big cost for Sangha Live, building that, maintaining that, monitoring that, hosting that, etc. So those kinds of offerings, we're only really able to do them, and certainly to continue them or grow them with your support. So if you're able to and you wish to support that, please do. And however much you're able to offer, or however little you're able to offer, right? Firstly, I just want to appreciate the goodness of you actually making an offering. It's easy to feel appreciation and then, I'll offer Dharma some other time. Well, maybe this is the other time. So you can just go to sangha.live/donate. And that's the link. You'll find that link also in the email that you got reminding you of the session. Sangha.live/donate. Thank you. All right. Questions. Let's see, where do they start? Lucy says, I'm a bit confused about your description of the mind as the foundation of the emptiness. The foundation sounds rather solid. Yeah. It sounds like a contradiction, Lucy, right? What's sometimes called the groundless ground, right? So not solid in some way, but so foundation is in some ways might be a misleading word, but there's that sense that the primordial nature of our mind can be known both as, or can appear both as, the radiant empty display. All of mind is just this radiant empty display, or rather all of reality is the radiant empty display of the mind. And then it can also be known as, how is this radiant empty display possible? Right? Because mind is the primordial ground, or the groundless ground, right? Mind is the limitless container, might also say, the boundless space that allows this empty radiant display, or that reflects this radiant empty display, or that makes this empty radiant display possible. Yeah. So that sounds paradoxical, but it depends on whether we're mostly, we can both know ourselves as the radiant display or that which allows the radiant display to be known. They sound contradictory, but they're not experientially or non-dualistically. Katie says, the word emptiness brings up a sense of loss and abandonment for me. Yeah. So there's a sense of, we can know a sense of deficient emptiness, and often in psychological terminology, emptiness is used to refer to some sense of lack and might well be associated with loss and abandonment. So maybe you think you might be more helpful to relate to transparency as a synonym. Don't need to use the word emptiness. Transparency. Everything being transparent. What fluid? Radiant. Radiant. And it also might be that there's many other qualities that you can relate to or orientate towards rather than emptiness. So sometimes relating just to a sense of a space of allowing or tending to experience. So that sense of cultivating a loving awareness might be more helpful sometimes if orientating to emptiness or just the term emptiness feels, brings up a sense of deficiency or a difficulty. Yeah. Heidi says, feeling in touch with the non-permanence, which feels approachable, real, and enhances your sense of caring for each moment. But associations with emptiness are all negative. Yeah. A void of blackness. Yes. So emptiness often is associated with blackness. And at first layer, when we empty in and enter into, same with impermanence, actually, really contacting impermanence, often the first layer of that contact is a sense of kind of, everything dies, everything ends. Someone offers you flowers, you see they're already on their way to turning to compost. And it's like, it has a sense of a disconsolate or depressing feel about it. And then we stay with that. And it's like we allow ourselves to grieve for the fact that everything ends. And then the other side of that emerges within it, which is that everything is constantly new, dynamic, alive, coming into being. The compost, we saw the flowers changing, is also the compost that allows flowers to come. So if you have to see for yourself what your resources are, Heidi, in one sense, I would encourage you to just really stay steady with all of that, to tolerate the sadness, the desert, the comfortless desert, right? If you can. And then they collapse, like you say, I've just seen the bottom of your question, then they collapse, right, into the other side of emptiness, which is the radiance. That's why I said the empty, radiant display. The fact that there's this extraordinary dynamism to life, that emptiness is also incredibly generative. It's like it's the foundation out of which everything emerges, the empty, radiant display. So there's that possibility, right? But if it feels if the sense of negative, void, sadness, desert of fear, or if that's too much, then you don't go there in little bits. So you stay with it and let everything collapse into empty blackness if you can. And if you can't, just be realistic about that. Too much. Right now, it's too much. And you have to just tend to the sadness, right? So you get to digest that emotional layer of fear or sadness or hopelessness. Those are really common experiences that arise in relationship to contemplating emptiness. And they're things that can be, it's good to tend to sadness and hopelessness. That's how they get purified, I could say, or transcended or dissolved or digested, right? Working through, because it's not just that we feel sad or hopeless about emptiness. It's revealing, you know, the sadness or hopelessness that is undigested to do with all kinds of other things in life as well. But when you meet it in emptiness, it's really about existential fear, existential hopelessness. Existential means the fear of my own annihilation, that I've tried to be a self for all these years, and now I find actually being invited to just to let that attempt to be a self dissolve into what? Into empty radiance. Yeah. Hazel says, I often experience what I call vastness. Is this the same thing as emptiness? So I would say it's not quite the same thing, but it's of the same order, right? So we can, when we get beyond the usual dualistic sense, I'm here, you're there, and this is this, and that's that, right? And that's our usual way of perceiving in a kind of narrow way, or a solidified way, a dualistic way. Right? And then as we soften that, different nuances of reality can stand out. So one of those is vastness, just the sense, consciousness. I used to think consciousness was this thing that was in my head. And it turns out, actually, the feeling of consciousness is one of just vastness, boundlessness, right? Immensity. So that's one nuance of seeing the nature of consciousness. And then emptiness is another newer nuance of that, right? Actually nothing. That which I take as having form actually reveals itself as having this fluid, transparent, empty display. So they're slightly different. They're pointing to slightly different nuances or facets or dimensions of what's fundamentally completely indescribable and ungraspable and even incomprehensible, right? Vastness, right? In the infinity of consciousness is ungraspable. The emptiness of everything is ungraspable. And yet somehow it is knowable directly. So it may be that the nuance that you more readily attune to right now is vastness. That's fine. Just let that vastness keep opening up, so that your understanding of it is not just a conceptual understanding, and nor is it just an experiential understanding in the moment, but that it sort of becomes what I sometimes call a cellular understanding. There'll be a sense of, we just know it in our bones that our being is vast, is wide open, is uncontainable. Yeah. All right. I think there's probably more there, but how are we doing? Oh, we've got a few minutes left. There's a lot of comments, so I can't track everything. A couple of people are mentioning Yanai, so I didn't know how public that is, but some of you know Yanai Pastelnik, one of the long-term teachers at Gaia House, who was recently diagnosed with cancer. It's early stage, and he had surgery yesterday, actually. And I got a message from his wife yesterday afternoon about it. Seems like it went well. There's now, post-surgery, there'll be a biopsy, etc. But anyway, that's. I didn't see what was shared about Yanai's condition above, but if you know, as some of you do, that that's his situation, and maybe being fond of Yanai, connected to Yanai for a long time. Yanai's been a very dear friend for a long time. Sometime early 90s, I think we probably met. Yeah, so it's nice to see your appreciation for him and well-wishing for him. Yeah. Okay. I thought I saw a question from Lean somewhere. Yes. How best to relate to solidity that keeps on reappearing in familiar surroundings. So I'd probably, to get into that, Lean, and we can get into that in a different forum than here, I need to know a little bit more about the type of solidity and the particular surroundings it appears in. But in a way, you can't make, when things appear as solid, you can look for their emptiness, which is what we were doing in the meditation a bit, but you can't make the emptiness happen, if you like. You can't make that which seems solid dissolve. But whatever experiences or whatever understanding you have in the bank, as it were, about the empty, radiant nature of things, you can, it's like knowing that, you can then study the solidity. So in this moment, I'm really convinced, this seems really real. This conflict I have with somebody, or this obsession I have, or this fear I have, it feels really real, and I feel myself banging into it. It's like, okay, some part of me knows that this is just a solidity that I'm making up. So let me study that solidity. What am I believing about the thing? What am I believing about myself? What's happening in the interaction that's creating that sense of solidity? And just to stay kind of gently, tenderly curious. So you're not rejecting the solidity. You're not trying to make it disappear into emptiness. No, you're studying it. The study of solidity will reveal emptiness, I could say. Yeah. All right. And then just lastly, I'll see Eleanor says, right, refers, the voice in meditation kept saying, oh, uncomfortable, uncomfortable. And I noticed it was only in the head, not the actual experience. Excellent. Any other way to approach this? I would say just stay with that approach, Eleanor, noticing that the label uncomfortable is a label and isn't the actual experience. And so when you go from the label, the story, the description, into the direct experience, and you might find something quite different. You might still find, and what you find, even if it is uncomfortable, when you get underneath the label, you get to something that's radiant and empty, right? You get underneath the label uncomfortable, you get to, the actual tingling, the heat, the density, the interplay of sensation in your leg or your back or wherever it is. And that itself isn't uncomfortable, which is a solid thing, a label. It's dynamic. It's both empty, right? You can't find, what's that thing I'm calling uncomfortable, my leg. When you go there, you don't find my leg. You find sensation. You find fluidity. And so you find something that's actually displaying a quality both of emptiness, right, constant change, and of radiance. It's like it's dynamic. Those sensations are dancing. So that's a good example, right? You're giving, I'm uncomfortable, I don't want to be here. Solid. And then dropping beneath that reactive layer and that description into the actual aliveness of what's happening. Oh, different. Very different. All right. Thank you, friends. Attend to the empty, radiant display of things as you go through your day. Thanks for your presence and your practice and your dana. And I'll see you tomorrow.